Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Books of Breathing. The Books of Breathing are a series of ancient Egyptian books that contain the secrets to the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians were so sure that they knew what would happen to the soul after the body died that they had the entire journey from death to the afterlife mapped out in these mysterious ancient texts. The books represent a collection of funerary literature dating back about 2,300 years. The purpose of these books was to assist the dead on their journey to the next world. The word breathing in this case is just a metaphor for the continuation of the deceased soul as they moved into the great beyond. And unlike a lot of other ancient Egyptian texts, archaeologists have found several examples of the books of breathing, still intact and currently housed in museums around the world. One of the very first books of breathing to be found was acquired in 1894 by the Field Museum of Natural History, gifted to them by an American businessman who purchased it while traveling in Europe. Just recently, Professor Foy Scalf analyzed the book in a way never done before. Through his research, he learned that the text was written and illustrated by a single scribe using a split-reed Calamos pen, and that the scribe wrote over the seams on the papyrus sheets. So, how were these books used? The first book of breathing was placed under the deceased's head, while the second book of breathing was placed under their feet. The books were to be kept there so that the spirit could read them and learn how to travel into the afterlife and not get stuck. The professor also learned that the books were made up of a selection of older spells, taken from the original Egyptian Book of the Dead. Number 9. The Pope's Erotic Novel. Pope Pius II was born in the year 1405, and from August 1458 until his death in 1464, he was the indisputable ruler of the Catholic Church and the Papal States. But before the Pope turned to the priesthood, he lived a pretty exciting life. He left his family farm at 18, studied in Florence, served as a secretary to the Bishop of Fermo, had children out of wedlock, and wrote an erotic novel. As far as we know, this is the only pope in history who wrote his very own romance novel, detailing adultery, fiery passion, and erotic scandal. We don't know everything that happened to Pope Pius II, but we know that he had a very robust love life, to say the least. He fathered at least one child outside of marriage, and he was a prolific writer. His most famous work was a book called, in English, The Tale of Two Lovers. It's a steamy romance novel complete with erotic illustrations and everything. It details the story of lovers Lucretia and Euryalus who met at a funeral. Their very first interaction is giving one another flirty glances over the body of a dead person. Once he was ordained, the new Pope Pius II tried hard to hide the recklessness of his youth, but much to his dismay, his erotic novel, The Tale of Two Lovers, became one of the best-selling books of the 15th century. Number 8. The Book of Poisons. In the year 1600, give or take a few years, a secret stash of poison was bound just like a book and turned into a secret stash of fatal elixirs. This artifact is called the Assassin's Cabinet of Poison, and it's not actually a book. Rather, it's a very tiny cabinet containing lethal substances that can be used for assassinating people. It's kind of like a hollowed-out Bible, a secret hiding place 400 years old. The pages of an actual book were glued together to create a large block, and then that block was hollowed out and installed with 11 tiny drawers. In the bottom corner of the book is a small glass jar, and on all the drawers is a handwritten label describing the lethal compound hidden inside. The Assassin's Book is something of a mystery. We don't know if it really was an assassin's toolkit or a mobile pharmacy. It could have been used for good or evil. It's hard to say, since it could be snuck into pretty much anywhere. We don't know much else about it because nobody knows where it came from. The mysterious Book of Poison appeared in 2008 and went up for auction in Europe and sold for $5,590. Before it was sold, scientists were able to find out what was actually kept in the little drawers. There was stinking nightshade, opium poppy, wolfsbane, water hemlock, mandrake, devil's snare, valerian, spurge laurel, palm of Christ, naked lady, and belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade. Deadly nightshade was used during the days of the Roman Empire to create poison-tipped arrows. Number 7. The Book of Insects. Inside one of the college libraries at the University of Cambridge, stashed deep in Trinity Hall, there is a mysterious book on insects. The book dates back roughly 400 years to 1634 and was only recently opened up. When the book was opened, a researcher discovered a perfectly preserved butterfly sandwiched between the pages. The university now believes the butterfly was probably left inside the ancient insect book by its original owner, way back in the 17th century. The find was just made by a librarian in Trinity Hall when she was looking through ancient animal texts. The butterfly is just as colorful as the day it was put in the book, even though the dead insect is unbelievably old. And although researchers say it's pretty common for plant specimens to be found pressed into old books, it's almost unheard of to find insects. The book is called The Wonderful Theater of Insects, donated to the college by a book collector named Lawrence Strangman when he died in 1980. Number 6. The Book of Kells. Some historians have called the Book of Kells the greatest treasure of medieval Europe. It's a cherished masterpiece of Ireland, a beautifully illustrated Bible that was created by monks sometime between the 6th and 8th centuries. These monks lived on the remote Scottish island of Iona, cramped in primitive stone huts and exposed to the raging ocean winds. The most extraordinary thing about the book is that these isolated monks could complete such a surprising masterpiece in such a harsh environment. The most extravagant illustrations are found on the covers of the 4 Gospels, which form the Latin text of the manuscript. The monks had limited materials, lived in hollowed-out rocks that looked kind of like beehives, and their only other company was the seagulls. The island of Iona is quite similar to Skellig Michael with its beehive monasteries, a truly remote and challenging place even these days. Back in the 6th century, the island was under constant threat of Viking raids. It was one reason that the monks took refuge on the smaller islands off the coast, so they could hide. All these years later, the Book of Kells is still in fairly good condition. Only 60 of its pages are missing, which is pretty good considering it was stolen from the stone church of Kells in the year 1006. Then it showed up in some ruins in 1653 and was sent to Dublin, where it eventually made its way to Trinity College, where it remains safe and sound. Number 5. The Little Children's Little Book. 500 years ago, an unknown author wrote a book on etiquette and table manners. The book was aimed at children, warning them against such faux pas as picking their noses, burping, and eating all the cheese. It's called The Little Children's Little Book, and it was published in 1480, written in Middle English, the predecessor of modern English. It was clearly written to help children behave in a more noble and proper manner, but I wonder who was making them read this? Parents? Nannies? In any case, the history of this book has led researchers to believe it was probably written by someone of noble birth, or at least written intending to be sold to royal households. Children are warned in the book not to drink too much while their lord is drinking, not to laugh, grin, speak out of turn, and spit across the table. They shouldn't pick their teeth with a knife, shouldn't pick their ears, and shouldn't be greedy when food is brought out. Believe it or not, these types of books were extremely popular in Europe all the way to the 18th century. According to the British Library, it's called a courtesy book, and it was taken very seriously. The author even makes a direct link between good behavior and religion. For example, they say that curtsying is an act that comes directly from heaven. There are 3 copies currently stored at the British Library, with 3 others in private collections. And now for number 6. But first, it's shout-out time! Big thank you to Tyrannel and Mandy Bobbitt for supporting Origins Explained. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Number 4. The Black Book of Kamarthan. The Black Book of Kamarthan dates back to 1250 AD and is currently held in the National Library of Wales. It's the earliest manuscript we know about written solely in the Welsh language. It's also one of the very first books in history to contain any mention of King Arthur and the wizard Merlin. The book was probably written by a single scribe who collected and recorded a variety of material over his life, such as poetry, folklore, and religious tales. Professor Paul Russell with the University of Cambridge has been working for years to unlock the secrets of this manuscript. Just recently, the professor used ultraviolet light on the manuscript pages to reveal a pair of ghostly faces. The discovery of the sketches came as a total surprise. Someone had drawn these ghoulish faces in the book almost 1,000 years ago, then erased them. The erased images were covered over in writing, and it was only with the ultraviolet light that they were seen for the first time. Nobody knows who these faces belong to or why they are in the book, only that they are extremely creepy. Less creepy was the fish that researchers found a few pages further on, also revealed under the ultraviolet light. Someone had used this book for their doodles, before it became the Black Book of Kamarthan. Number 3. The Doomsday Book. The Doomsday Book is a record of the very first major survey done in England to keep tabs on the public. You can think of it like the very first census, done just about 1,000 years ago at the order of William the Conqueror. In the year 1085, the king decided he needed to create a registry for every single person who lived in his kingdom. So William, who was the very first Norman king of England, sent his agents to survey every single English shire, as well as some parts of Wales. The list included the holdings of every single person, and of course, how many taxes they owed to the king. In total, more than 200,000 people are counted in the Doomsday Book, each of whom was the head of a family. The entire plot behind the creation of this manuscript was to get a handle on the taxes which had been owed to the previous ruler, King Edward the Confessor. Once William had the list all figured out, he could assert his right to collect that money. In simple terms, it was an extremely complicated door-to-door operation to start a record of the population. Some argue for the king to extort. But there was much information revealed in this census, and it has helped us learn a lot about how the population has increased and changed. Surprisingly, the book has survived all the way to today and is currently being held at the National Archives at Kew in London. Number 2. The Book of Exposition. The Book of Exposition is one of the most controversial and forbidden texts that's ever been written in Arabic. It's a collection of erotica from the 15th century. Nobody knows exactly who wrote the book or where it came from, but most educated guesses say it was Jalal ad-Din al-Suyuti, written sometime around the year 1500. He was an Egyptian polymath and erotologist. It's believed that he's probably the one behind the over 24 stories presented in this book. Things that would be outrageous even in a modern novel. These are taboos that had no place in the Arab Islamic world. To give you an idea of the wacky stories that are put in this book, let's look at one in particular. A certain man is given 3 wishes which Allah will grant him. When his wife learns the wishes, she requests that his instrument be lengthened. What follows is both comical and wildly inappropriate. There's even a story in the book titled The Pious Woman and What Happened to Her from Behind. We'll just leave it at that. Let's say that you would be surprised this was from the 15th century. Number 1. Codex Serafinianos. The Codex Serafinianos is a strange art book that isn't very old, written by Luigi Serafini. It was published in 1981 as a sort of visual encyclopedia, and while it's filled with some beautiful images and unusual illustrations, it's also written in a strange language that's never been deciphered. The whole allure of the book is that it appears to be an encyclopedia detailing monsters, plants, and facets of a world totally alien to our own. It's over 300 pages of unintelligible descriptions and confusing imagery. A man riding his own coffin, a creature floating on the surface of the sea with weird fish eyes, and a couple in bed who morphs into a crocodile. In reality, this text is really just a creative handbook made by an artistic genius. It's a book containing a fantasy world, a kind of a blend between Alice in Wonderland and an unexplored planet in outer space. Although the nonsense language in the book has fascinated conspiracy theorists as a kind of indecipherable alien tongue, it means nothing. The author even admitted it, saying the strange script he uses in the book to describe the pictures doesn't mean anything at all. So, while this is definitely a mysterious book, it's not some kind of mystic work written by aliens with secrets of the universe. Or maybe the author just wants to keep the mystery alive. Thanks for watching! Which of these mysterious books would you love to get your hands on? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you later! Bye!